Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're taking a journey into the heart of forests.
Yeah, we're going to uncover all sorts of connections you might not even realize are there.
Absolutely. It's going to be a fascinating exploration. I've got a ton of great source material to dig into.
Looking forward to it. Should be a fun one.
For sure. Okay, so let's just imagine for a second we're walking through a forest. What's the first thing you notice?
Well, the first thing that always gets me is just how much life there is.
Yeah.
Everywhere you look, there's something going on. It's like this energy just pulsing through the whole place.
Totally. Our source material actually uses this really cool analogy. It compares a forest to a big multi-story apartment building.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, each layer of the forest is like a different floor
Yeah.
with its own unique community of plants and animals.
Makes sense, yeah. You've got the canopy at the top, then the understory below that, and finally the forest floor.
Right. So let's break down those layers a bit. What makes each one so special?
Well, the canopy, that's like the roof, right? It's where the tallest trees are, all reaching for the sun. Lots of sunlight and wind up there. It's a perfect spot for birds, monkeys, anything that likes to be high up.
Okay, and then below that, we've got the understory.
Exactly. That's where the smaller trees and shrubs hang out.
The ones that don't need as much sun.
Yeah, they can handle a bit more shade. Think of it like the middle floors of our apartment building.
Yeah.
You'll find a lot of insects, reptiles, birds, all finding food and shelter in the dense vegetation.
Cool. So what about the ground level, the forest floor?
Ah, that's where things get really interesting. That's where decomposition happens. All the fallen leaves, branches, even dead animals, they all break down and return nutrients to the soil.
Ah, so it's like the building's foundation in a way.
Exactly. It's kind of dark and damp down there, perfect for fungi, bacteria, all those little decomposers.
So it's all connected then. Each layer plays a role.
Oh, absolutely. It's a constant interplay between them. Creatures moving up and down, resources being exchanged. It's a whole system.
That actually reminds me of something else our source material mentions. The forest as a habitat.
Right.
What does that actually mean in this context?
Basically, a habitat is just a place where a plant or animal can live and find everything it needs.
Yep.
Food, water, shelter, the right conditions, it's all got to be there. And forests are amazing habitats because they support so many different species.
Wow, yeah. So one forest can be home to tons of different creatures, all finding their own little niche in this ecosystem.
Exactly. That's what we call biodiversity, and it's one of the things that makes forests so vital.
It's easy to just see the beauty of a forest, but there's so much going on beneath the surface.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of beneath the surface, we should talk about decomposers.
Yes. They're kind of the unsung heroes of the forest, aren't they?
Totally. It's easy to forget about them, but they play a huge role in keeping everything running smoothly.
So what do they actually do?
Well, decomposers are these organisms, like fungi and bacteria, that break down dead organic matter. It's called decomposition.
Okay, so they're basically like nature's recyclers.
Exactly. And this process is super important for what we call nutrient cycling.
Nutrient cycling.
Yeah, think about it. When a tree falls or a leaf drops, it doesn't just vanish. Decomposers get to work, breaking it down into simpler compounds. And as they do that, they release nutrients back into the soil, things like nitrogen and phosphorus.
Ah, so it's a cycle. The nutrients that go back into the soil and then plants use them to grow.
Exactly. It's like this beautiful circle of life and death. And without decomposers, those nutrients would just stay locked up in the dead stuff.
The forest wouldn't be able to support all that life.
Exactly. It's amazing how these tiny organisms that we can't even see have such a huge impact.
It really is. Now, before we move on, let's take a question from one of our listeners. What stood out to you so far about the way a forest is structured? What's sparking your curiosity?
Yeah, love to hear your thoughts. It really does make you think about how important every part of the forest is.
Yeah, it's all connected. Like our source material also talks about how forests play a big role in the water cycle. How does that work?
Well, you can almost think of forests like giant sponges.
Sponges.
Yeah, they soak up rainwater and then they release it slowly back into the environment. That helps to regulate water flow, prevents floods and droughts.
Okay, so how do they actually soak up all that water? Like, is it just the trees themselves?
It's the whole system, really. The trees, with their massive root systems, act like a network of pipes, drawing water deep into the ground.
And then the forest floor, with all those layers of leaves and stuff, that acts like a sponge holding on to the moisture.
Exactly. It's a team effort.
So it's not just about the trees. It's the whole structure of the forest that helps regulate water.
Exactly. And that has a ripple effect on the whole surrounding landscape. By slowing down the flow of water, forests help prevent soil erosion, and they recharge groundwater supplies, which is where our wells and springs get their water from.
Wow, it's amazing how something as simple as a tree can have such a big impact on something as essential as water.
It is pretty incredible. And that actually brings us to another important concept, forests as green lungs. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I have. That's where photosynthesis comes in, right?
Exactly. Remember how plants use sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugars for energy?
Yeah, I remember learning about that.
Well, during that process, they release oxygen as a byproduct.
Ah, okay. So they're breathing in carbon dioxide, which is that harmful greenhouse gas, and they're breathing out oxygen, which we need to survive.
That's it. And since forests cover such huge areas of land, they act like giant air filters, pulling in massive amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
So they're playing a key role in fighting climate change by reducing greenhouse gas levels.
Exactly. And it's not just about absorbing carbon dioxide. Forests also help regulate temperature and humidity.
Oh, so they're creating these microclimates that are good for both plants and animals.
Right. And that leads us to another concept, biodiversity, which is just a fancy word for the variety of life in an ecosystem.
And forests are known for being super biodiverse.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Well, think of it this way. A diverse forest is like a strong immune system. It's more resistant to pests, diseases, even climate change.
So the more variety there is, the better equipped the forest is to handle challenges and stay balanced.
Precisely. And that diversity benefits us humans in so many ways, too.
Yeah, our source material talks about all the ways we rely on forests, all the things they provide for us. It's called ecosystem services, right?
That's the term. It's a good reminder that forests aren't just pretty to look at. They're essential for our survival.
So what are some examples of these ecosystem services? We've already talked about water and air quality. What else?
Well, there's timber, of course, and fuel wood, and medicinal plants, and food sources like fruits, nuts, mushrooms.
And what about the cultural and recreational value? Hiking, camping, all that stuff. That's important too, right?
Absolutely. Forests are good for our souls. They give us a chance to connect with nature, which is so important for our well-being.
Right. But sadly, not everyone sees forests this way. Our source material mentions deforestation, which is basically just clearing forests for other uses.
Yeah, and that's where things get a bit more serious. Deforestation has some pretty devastating consequences, both for the environment and for us humans.
Like what kind of consequences are we talking about?
Well, remember how forests are these huge carbon sinks absorbing all that carbon dioxide? When you clear a forest, all that carbon gets released back into the atmosphere.
And that contributes to climate change, right?
Exactly. And it also messes with the water cycle, leading to more soil erosion, more floods, and droughts.
Wow, it's like a chain reaction.
It is. And of course, when you clear a forest, you're destroying habitats, which means loss of biodiversity and potentially even extinction of species.
It's a bit scary to think about. But before we get too deep into the dark side of things, let's take another question from our listener. What are you thinking and feeling as we talk about this delicate balance of forests and the threats they face?
I'm curious to hear your perspective. It really does, it makes you realize that these forests, they're not just, a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
They're connected to us in a way deeper way.
Absolutely. So it's not just about saving trees, it's about protecting something that's part of who we are.
Exactly. So I think that leads to the big question, what can we actually do to protect them? The good news is even small things can make a difference.
Our source material talks about individual responsibility. What are some things we can do, like in our everyday lives, to help with forest conservation?
Well, one simple thing is being mindful of how much paper we use. Cut back, where you can choose recycled options.
That makes sense.
Right.
Reduce the demand for new wood pulp.
Right. And it's not just paper. Think about other wood products, too. Furniture, flooring, anything made from wood.
So when we buy those things, we should be looking for sustainable options.
Exactly. Look for certifications like the FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council.
That ensures the wood comes from responsibly managed forests.
Yep. It's about supporting practices that keep forests healthy in the long run.
And of course, there's always planting trees.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. Whether it's in your own yard or supporting a reforestation project.
It's a hands-on way to give back to nature.
Exactly. A real legacy for the future. And beyond individual actions, we can also advocate for change on a bigger scale.
Right. Support organizations that are fighting deforestation, pushing for better policies.
Exactly. We need to use our voices and our resources to get that message out there.
And knowledge is key too, right? The more we understand about forests, the more likely we are to care about protecting them.
Absolutely. We need to educate ourselves and spread the word. And, maybe we can learn from communities who've been living in harmony with forests for centuries.
That's a great point.
Indigenous people all over the world, they have so much traditional knowledge about how to manage forests sustainably.
Yeah, we should be listening to them.
Exactly, respecting their rights to their ancestral lands. It's about realizing we can be stewards of nature, not just exploiters.
That's a powerful message.
Mm-hmm.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling hopeful. There are things we can do to make a real difference.
Absolutely.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of forests.
Yeah, a good reminder of how interconnected everything is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those trees standing tall.